In that moment, the cameras were rolling as Trump lost his cool, demanding that Obama get off the stage. But in that second, Obama didn't budge. He spoke a phrase that turned the whole audience against Trump. The space was set for a historic occasion. There were huge chandeliers hanging down over polished marble floors. Cameras were lined up against the walls like they were watching. Every single chair in the White House's East Room was taken. Senators, governors, ambassadors, and reporters were all packed in tight. They weren't just there to listen to speeches about working together across party lines. They were there to see a moment where two living presidents, one current and one former, would be under the same roof. The tension was hard to miss. You could feel it in the way people leaned forward, whispering softly before getting quiet again quickly. Washington had seen a lot of political drama, but this particular night already felt different. Former President Barack Obama, wearing a dark suit with his usual calm expression, was supposed to speak after dinner. At the head table, President Donald Trump sat stiffly, surrounded by assistants who were clearly nervous. The cameras never left him. Everyone in that room knew that when Trump and Obama were on the same platform, sparks were pretty much guaranteed to fly. But here's what nobody saw coming. The evening would become one of the most shocking public arguments ever seen inside those famous walls. The event had been announced a few weeks earlier as a way to show unity. Invitations were sent to leaders from both political parties, with the promise of speeches about cooperation and the strength of America's democratic institutions. The irony was not lost on anyone. A White House aide was heard in the hallway muttering that calling the event Unity Night was like inviting fire and water to dinner and expecting a friendly greeting. At first, things seemed calm. Dinner went smoothly, full of light conversation about policy, international partnerships, and even football. The cameras sometimes showed the tables, capturing laughter, clinking glasses, and quick flashes of smiles that seemed a little practiced. But underneath, people were on edge. Reporters typed quickly, looking back and forth between Trump and Obama, waiting for the moment one of them would create a headline. That moment arrived faster than anyone imagined. When Obama finally stood up, the mood changed. Some guests clapped warmly, others hesitated, their eyes moving toward Trump. The former president began speaking in his well-known style, with a measured and careful rhythm, carrying importance without being forceful. He spoke about the toughness of American institutions, the need to put the country ahead of a political party, and the duty leaders have to control personal ego for the good of the nation's stability. His voice echoed softly through the East Room, his delivery steady and sure. History will not judge us by how loudly we talk, Obama said, looking around the room, but by whether we paid attention, and by whether we chose bravery over confusion and unity over division. A few people nodded in agreement. A few others tightened their lips, clearly uneasy. But everyone felt the same thing. Obama wasn't just giving a speech, he was making a point, and everyone knew who the point was aimed at. Trump moved in his chair, his fingers drumming on the table, his eyes becoming narrow. Assistants near him exchanged worried glances. Obama kept going, his words calm but clearly pointed. This country is bigger than one person's pride. It is stronger than any one person's character. And it will last as long as we remember that truth. The air in the room grew heavier. Even experienced politicians leaned forward, unsure of how Trump would respond. The cameras zoomed in, sensing the trouble ahead. And then it happened. Trump abruptly stood up, his chair scraping against the marble floor, the sound cutting through the quiet like a knife. He pointed right at Obama, his voice rising over the silence. "Get out." The words slammed into the room, raw and unfiltered. Gasps were heard. Journalists straightened up, scrambling to record every second. Several senators froze with their forks halfway to their mouths. A diplomatic guest from Europe raised his eyebrows, whispering to the person next to him, "Did he really just say that?" Obama stood still, not moving at all. He didn't flinch or break eye contact. His silence stretched out over the chaos, controlling the room without a word. For a second, it felt as though time itself had slowed down, with everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Trump's aides hurried toward him, whispering frantically. Staff members tried to calm the shock spreading among the guests, but it was too late. The words had been spoken, and the cameras had captured it all. The East Room, a place that had been the setting for decades of history, now held a tension that was incredibly thick. What had started as a night for unity had become something very different, something no one could stop watching. But the real story hadn't even begun yet, because Obama's reply would soon turn that tense silence into one of the most unforgettable moments in modern politics. The room was still buzzing from Trump's outburst. Reporters whispered frantically, aides shuffled nervously, and several guests avoided looking at each other. It wasn't just the surprise of a sitting president yelling, "Get out!" at a former president, it was the unfiltered nature of it. The kind of political event you could never plan. It was the kind of moment that immediately burned itself into the memory of anyone who witnessed it. Obama, however, didn't move. His hands rested gently on the lectern, his posture relaxed, his face calm. For a man who had faced people yelling at him, critics and crises on the world stage, this was just another moment, just magnified by the importance of where it was happening and who it was against. Instead of raising his voice, Obama leaned closer to the microphone. His tone was steady, careful, almost gentle. "Mr. President," he began, his eyes never leaving Trump, "with all due respect, this room does not belong to you. It belongs to the American people." The silence that followed was heavy. Every ear strained to hear his next words. A cameraman in the back actually lowered his equipment for a split second, stunned by the directness of the reply. Obama continued, "I was invited here, just as you were, to speak on unity. And if unity makes you this uneasy, maybe it says more about where we are as a country than anything I could ever say tonight." The line cut through the tension like breaking glass. Murmurs broke out at the tables. A senator from Arizona shook her head slowly, mouthing the word, "Wow." A group of college students who had been invited to witness the event whispered excitedly, their phones already on, recording. Trump bristled, his lips pressed into a tight line. He gestured to one of his aides, clearly signaling for the microphone to be turned off, but the staff hesitated. No one wanted to be the one responsible for silencing a former president on live television. Obama glanced briefly at the crowd, then returned his attention to Trump. "You can ask me to leave," he said, his voice calm but firm, "but you can't erase what needs to be heard." The East Room broke out in applause, not polite applause, but real, thunderous clapping, with some guests even standing up. The sound echoed so loudly that it almost drowned out the sound of aides, frantically pacing near the walls. Obama raised a hand slightly, asking for quiet. His calm only made the importance of his words bigger. "This isn't about me and it isn't about you," he said, his tone softening. "It's about every American family watching tonight. Families who are tired of leaders treating politics like a personal feud. Families who don't care about insults and power games. They care about whether their children can grow up safe, whether their parents can afford health care, whether their opinions matter." Trump shifted again, clearly angry. But the applause kept getting louder. Guests who hadn't dared to clap before now joined in, feeling encouraged by the moment. Obama leaned in. "The truth, Mr. President, is that history won't remember how loudly we shouted each other down. It will remember whether we stood up when it was important, whether we chose respect or confusion, whether we built something lasting or left behind nothing but bitterness." The crowd grew quiet again, not out of fear, but out of respect. The words were hitting their mark, one after another, steady as a drum beat. Trump finally raised his voice again. "You're here to embarrass me! That's all this is!" Obama didn't flinch. "I'm here to remind you that the presidency is bigger than one person's pride. Bigger than my pride, bigger than yours. And the moment we forget that, we all lose." The room was electric. Even those who didn't agree with Obama politically couldn't deny the power of his delivery. He hadn't shouted, hadn't insulted, hadn't used cheap tricks. He had simply spoken, and the words carried all the weight they needed to. Cameras zoomed in close on his face, capturing the calm expression, the unshakable tone. Social media platforms were already lighting up with video clips and hashtags forming in real time. Millions at home weren't just watching, they were reacting. But inside the room, the mood had shifted. Guests leaned in closer, hanging on every word. Staff members stopped moving. Even Trump's own aides looked conflicted, unsure whether to step in or let the confrontation play out. Obama slightly adjusted the microphone. "You can yell all you want," he said quietly, his voice carrying across the silence. But leadership isn't measured by how loud you are, it's measured by your character. Another wave of applause rolled through the East Room. Some people stood up again, others just clapped harder, but the sound was impossible to ignore. Trump's face turned red, his jaw tight. He tried to speak again, but the applause drowned him out. Obama waited, his hands still resting lightly on the lectern, until the sound faded enough for him to finish this part of his speech. "My message tonight is simple," he said. "We don't fix this country by tearing each other down. We fix it by remembering that we all serve something bigger than ourselves." The words echoed, staying in the room like a challenge no one could easily dismiss. But as powerful as that moment was, it was only the beginning, because Obama's final response would soon shake not just that room, but the entire nation watching from home. The applause had barely stopped when Trump lunged forward, grabbing the edge of his table as if getting ready for a fight. His face was flushed, his eyes darting between the cameras and Obama. For someone who loved a spectacle, the idea of being outshined in his own White House was unbearable. "You think you're some kind of saint, don't you?" Trump roared, his voice cracking through the East Room like thunder. "You come in here, into my house, and act like you've got all the answers. Let me tell you something. I'm the president, not you. Not anymore. Me." The words bounced off the walls, crashing into the shocked silence of the audience. Gasps spread through the tables. A woman from the State Department pressed her hands over her mouth. A couple of reporters from the Boston Globe exchanged wide-eyed looks before writing notes, so fast their pens almost tore the paper. Obama didn't respond right away. He just watched, calm as a statue, letting the outburst sink in. His stillness was such a sharp contrast to Trump's raw anger that it only made the tension worse. Trump jabbed a finger toward him. "You had your time, 8 years, and what did we get? A mess! Now you walk back in here like you're some kind of savior. Get out." I said, "Get out." He repeated the phrase louder, practically shouting over his own echo. "Get out." The audience shifted nervously. Senators from both sides fidgeted in their chairs. A guest from Dallas muttered under his breath, "This is crazy." Cameras zoomed in tight, capturing Trump's hand trembling as he gestured wildly, capturing Obama's calm expression, capturing the clash of two different styles in real time. Obama finally spoke, his tone quiet and deliberate. "Mr. President, the White House doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the American people, and they deserve better than this display." That only seemed to make Trump angrier. He turned to the audience, throwing his arms wide. "See this? See what he's doing? He's trying to make me look bad on national television. It's a disgrace." From the side, a senator from New Mexico stood up halfway, then sat back down, unsure whether to step in. No one wanted to be the first to get in the middle of this clash of egos. Trump slammed his hand on the table. "Security! Security! Where are you? I want him out of here." But the Secret Service agents near the doors didn't move. They exchanged careful looks, then stayed put. Removing a former president on live television was not just risky, it was unimaginable. The crowd could feel it. Trump had lost control, not just of the room, but of the very image he had so carefully tried to present. His authority, once absolute within those walls, was now cracking in front of millions. Obama didn't flinch. He leaned into the microphone. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I'm here because the people who invited me believe this country deserves a conversation about unity, about dignity, about leadership. If that makes you uneasy, then maybe the question isn't about me being here. Maybe it's about why you feel so threatened by the idea of unity." The line was sharp and clean. A collective gasp went through the room, followed quickly by a wave of applause that got louder and louder until it drowned out Trump's protests. "Sit down," Trump roared, but his voice broke against the wave of clapping hands. Obama straightened up, waiting calmly for the room to quiet down again. His face showed nothing but composure, while Trump fumed, pacing slightly behind his table, muttering to aides who had no idea what to do. The cameras captured everything the President of the United States, red-faced and angry, and the former president, steady and unshaken, delivering words that carried the weight of reason. "Respect isn't demanded," Obama said, his tone like steel wrapped in velvet. "It's earned. And right now, the American people are watching to see who among us understands that truth." The applause came again, this time stronger, as if the audience itself had chosen a side in real time.
"This is my presidency, my event,"
Trump shouted over it. "I won't be lectured by you in front of the world." Obama tilted his head slightly, not mockingly, but in a way that seemed closer to pity. "Your presidency, Mr. President, belongs to the people, not to you. That's the first thing every leader should understand." The audience stirred again, whispers moving through the rows of chairs. Even those who had come expecting a formal dinner now realized they were part of a moment that would be watched for decades. The clash wasn't just about two men, it was about two visions of leadership, crashing into each other under the same roof, one fueled by anger and showmanship, the other by calm defiance and words that seemed made to be remembered long after the microphones were turned off. Trump slammed the table once more. I said, "Get out," but this time, the demand didn't have any power. It sounded hollow, almost desperate, swallowed by the silence that followed, and then, almost as if on cue, a voice from the crowd broke the tension. It came from a governor seated near the back. "Let him speak." It was quiet at first, but then others picked it up. "Let him speak." A senator mumbled. "Let him speak," another echoed. Soon half the room was chanting it, their words coming together until it became impossible to ignore. Trump froze, his eyes darting around, stunned that his own event had slipped from his grasp. Obama stood silently waiting, but what came next would change the confrontation into something no one in that room or watching at home would ever forget. "Let him speak, let him speak," went through the East Room like a wave. At first, it was scattered and nervous, just a few voices testing the limits. But then it grew, gaining strength, until the whole room seemed to be moving with it. Senators, governors, reporters, students, diplomats, their voices rose together in unison, drowning out Trump's attempts to shout over them. Trump slammed his hand against the table again, red-faced, yelling, "This is my house, mine." But his words were buried under the noise. His own event had turned against him. The cameras caught every angle: Trump's rage, the crowd's resistance, Obama's composure. Obama stayed at the lectern, waiting patiently. He didn't gesture or shout for silence. He simply stood, steady as a mountain, letting the room find its voice. The image was striking: one man losing control, while another gained it, without even trying. When the chanting finally stopped, the silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't just silence, it was anticipation. Every eye in the room was on Obama, waiting for what he would say next. Obama leaned closer to the microphone, his voice calm and unhurried. "We are standing in the people's house," he said, carrying across the room. "Not one man's stage, not one party's theater. This is the people's house, and the people," he paused, looking at the crowd, "deserve to be heard." The audience cheered again, clapping and cheering. But this time, it wasn't wild or messy. It was steady, unified, deliberate. The applause rolled like thunder, echoing through the chandeliers and into the hallways beyond. Trump waved his arms, his voice cracking. "Fake news! They'll twist this! They'll make it look like I lost control." From the back of the room, a reporter from the Des Moines Register shouted, "Mr. President, they don't have to twist anything. The cameras are live." The crowd laughed, not in a mean way, but sharply, the way people laugh when someone points out the obvious truth. Trump's face turned redder, the laughter hurting him more than any insult. Obama took advantage of the quiet moment. No one came here tonight to watch two men yell at each other. They came here because they believe this country is capable of more. They believe we can sit at the same table, even when we disagree, and find a way forward. He gestured slightly toward Trump's table. "I'll say this again. Leadership is not about how loud you are. It's about vision. You can command a room with anger, or you can guide it with respect. The choice is yours, but one choice lasts longer than the other." The words landed with a heavy impact, staying not just in the East Room, but with the millions watching at home. Social media platforms were already on fire, with hashtags and memes forming, live streams analyzing each sentence in real time. On Twitter, one user typed, "Obama just turned Trump's house into his classroom." Trump clenched his fists, pacing behind his chair. "This is a setup, a total setup," he yelled, pointing toward the reporters.
"You're all against me, all of you."
But the crowd wasn't on his side anymore. Guests who would normally avoid any public show of disloyalty were now openly shaking their heads. Some looked down at their plates, embarrassed. Others exchanged knowing glances, the kind that silently said, "This is history, and we're watching it happen right here." A senator from Wisconsin leaned toward his colleague and whispered, loud enough for a nearby microphone to catch it, "I've never seen anything like this. He's falling apart." Obama didn't fight back or mock. He simply waited until the noise settled, then spoke again, his voice as steady as ever. Anger is simple. Blame is simple. But when the anger disappears, when the yelling stops, what will you have left? What will history remember? That you shouted the loudest, or that you chose to rise above it? For a moment, no one spoke. Even Trump fell into a strange silence, as if the importance of those words had stuck somewhere he couldn't shake off. The cameras zoomed in closely Obama at the lectern, his expression composed, his words carrying like a steady drum beat. Trump, in contrast, sat stiffly, his lips pressed together, face flushed, looking like a man cornered, not by force, but by his own loss of control. The energy in the room shifted again. People leaned in, captivated. Even those who had walked in doubtful of Obama found themselves drawn in. It wasn't about politics anymore. It was about two men, one using anger, the other using patience, and which one the country would remember. Then, from the press area, a reporter called out, "Mr. Obama, what do you say to those who believe unity is impossible under this administration?" Obama didn't hesitate. Unity is never impossible. It's only difficult, and difficult things are always worth fighting for. The room cheered again. Eyes on both sides scrambled nervously, unsure how to handle the night's energy. Trump muttered angrily under his breath, but his voice was drowned in the applause. The confrontation was no longer just a clash of egos. It was becoming a significant moment, one that would spread far beyond the walls of the White House. But the world outside was already reacting in real time, and the chaos growing beyond those walls was about to explode in ways no one inside could fully imagine. The East Room had become something like a courtroom. Every eye was watching the two men. Every breath felt held between Trump's angry outbursts and Obama's calm control. The contrast was impossible to miss. Where Trump fumed, Obama seemed like he was carved from stone, steady, deliberate, unshaken. For a moment, Obama let the silence exist. He didn't rush to fill it. He knew silence could be louder than words if it was held long enough. Slowly, he looked around the room, making eye contact with senators, governors, students, and staff, as if reminding them, "This isn't about two men, it's about all of you." Finally he spoke. "The presidency is not a crown," Obama said, his voice low but cutting through the room like a blade. "It's a duty, and sometimes duty means hearing things you don't want to hear." Murmurs spread. Some guests nodded, others sat frozen, unwilling to risk being caught clapping on camera. But the energy had shifted. The room now seemed to lean toward Obama. Trump slammed his fist on the table again. "You're not the president anymore, Barack. Nobody voted for you this time. Nobody wants to hear you preach." Obama didn't flinch. "And yet, here I am," he replied calmly, "because Americans still believe in decency, still believe in conversation, still believe in dignity." The crowd stirred again. A senator whispered, "That's going to be quoted forever." Trump's face became darker. "Don't lecture me about dignity. I built this country back up. You left it weak. You left it broken. Everyone knows it." Obama shook his head slightly, almost as if he felt sorry for the desperation. "Mr. President, strength isn't measured by how loudly you hit the table. It's measured by whether you lift people up or tear them down. And right now, the country is watching a president who mistakes being mean for being a leader." That statement hit hard. The crowd gasped. Even a few Republican senators exchanged uneasy looks. Trump turned toward the audience, looking for support. "You see, he's showing a lack of respect for the office, showing a lack of respect for me." From somewhere in the crowd, a voice shouted back, "Respect has to be earned." The room broke out in murmurs. Obama let the moment breathe again, then stepped closer to the microphone. His voice was calm and deliberate, but there was steel beneath it. "I spent 8 years in this office. I know how heavy the burden can be. I know the sleepless nights, the crises, the loneliness of leadership. But I also know this: you cannot lead a nation if you are controlled by your temper. You cannot unite a country if every criticism feels like a personal attack. Leadership requires patience. It requires humility." The East Room was dead quiet now. You could hear the cameras humming, the pens scratching across paper. Trump muttered angrily into the mic.
You think you're so perfect.
You think you never made mistakes. Obama shook his head. I made plenty. But the measure of a leader isn't whether he makes mistakes. It's whether he learns from them. And the measure of a nation isn't whether it has disagreements. It's whether it can rise above them. The words hung heavily in the air. People weren't just hearing a speech anymore. They were witnessing a moral lesson, one happening in real time. Trump stood up suddenly, knocking his chair back. This is over, he shouted, gesturing for aides to clear the lectern. I won't let him embarrass me in my own house. But again, the Secret Service didn't move. They stood watchful but still. Removing a former president who had been invited would have been political suicide. Obama leaned into the mic one last time. With all due respect, Mr. President, the people watching tonight aren't judging me. They're judging you. And the question they'll ask themselves tomorrow isn't, what did Obama say? It will be, how did Trump react? The crowd gasped again. Trump froze, his face twitching with fury. But he didn't respond. For the first time all night, his silence was louder than his words. Reporters typed quickly. Hashtags lit up across social media. Every news outlet knew instantly that the sound of that moment was already echoing across the country.